One environmental issue found with mining is the amount of waste left over and the ability to track and estimate this waste. Zobrist and Geiger state, whereas the annual production rates of metal or coal can be determined fairly well, appraising the amount of mining waste deposited in a country or continent is a very challenging task, and any estimates are necessarily rough. This waste can contain toxic chemicals dangerous to both ecosystems and humans. This is an issue because laws cannot be imposed without specific, measurable values limiting environmental pollution. This could be related to the precautionary principle as defined in our textbook, quote, governments and regulatory agencies do not debate how to eliminate the risk or prevent risk from being produced in the first place, but on how much risk, pollution in this case, is allowed and how to distribute the risk across the population. Governments cannot draft environmental laws or rather decide how much risk or pollution is allowed to protect communities and ecosystems near mining exploits if there's no way to accurately measure said risks or waste. Some of the most common environmental risks associated with mining, such as chemicals mixing with surrounding air and water. One way that water can be contaminated is waste processing, as discussed by the author Bridge. He explains that the average Canadian metal mine disposes of 98% of the materials mined, and there is often no market for this mineral waste. Part of this waste, tailings, is the material left once the desired part of an ore is extracted, has shown to significantly increase arsenic concentrations in mill tailing streams when compared to background levels. This and other wastes associated with mining can be related to the term metabolic rift found in our textbook, in that mining practices have, quote, have broken the ecological flow of nutrients within a circular loop of reuse and shifts it towards the linear production line of waste. An example of something that could lead to a smaller ecological footprint is a cradle-to-cradle design, where waste production and resource extraction are minimized by reusing materials. A partial example of this related to mining could be a battery recycling, as materials are reused, but recycling is generally not accepted as a true cradle-to-cradle design. There are many environmental risks known to be associated with mining, but what about social issues? Higher rates of sexual disease transmission is one such example that may not be being tracked in some underdeveloped countries. Bridge states in his study, recent studies point to HIV/AIDS as a leading mining hazard, particularly in South Africa, where the combination of widespread poverty and the system of migrant labor that developed under apartheid established social conditions conducive to the rapid transmission of sexually transmitted diseases. The World Bank estimates 20% of coal miners and 30% of gold miners in South Africa are HIV positive, prevalency rates 17% higher than in the base population, and productivity losses from the disease are estimated around 20%. This is one example of how mining has caused economic inequality and health issues all in one. Economic issues being that productivity is reduced by 20%, health in that HIV/AIDS prevalency rate is 17% higher than the base population, and inequality due to the fact most of the mine personnel are migrant workers living in poverty or descendants thereof stuck in the same life. Imperialism can be applied to this situation as the British system of apartheid led to using migrant workforce and widespread poverty. One could also argue that environmental racism led to migrant workers being used to work these mines as it was a hazardous occupation. Misgovernance and illegal logging has a positive correlation with carbon emissions. Ecosystems are damaged by illegal logging and endangered species are often logged and exported through bribes. The authors of a study on this topic explain, quote, Congo Basin timber-producing countries are characterized by increasing trend of illegal logging, poor governance, effectiveness, and corruption. Panel regression reveals a positive and significant impact of illegal logging, governance effectiveness, and corruption on carbon emission. Asian producing countries depict a reducing trend in illegal logging and improvements in governance and corruption. There is a positive but not significant impact of illegal logging on carbon emission, and governance effectiveness reduces carbon emission. Thus, the dynamics of governance, illegal logging, and carbon emission is not the same between timber-producing countries in Asia and Congo-producing countries, thus suggesting the ability of institutions to curb illegal logging and enforce laws to reduce the effects of carbon emission. Illegal logging significantly contributes to greenhouse gas emissions and also prevents carbon absorption from the atmosphere, also known as carbon capture sequestration, once the trees are logged. The authors studying illegal logging in the Congo Basin state, human-induced greenhouse gas emissions from forest clearance and degradation represent 12 to 20%, of which illegal logging is a significant contributor. Illegal logging contributes to loss of biodiversity, especially when certain species are highly logged. This has resulted in mahogany and tropical cedar being at risk of extinction in Indonesia. The loss or reduction of forest cover is accompanied by a subsequent loss of environmental services, and carbon sequestration capacity of forests is heavily reduced. A separate study conducted examined logging corporations operating in the Congo Basin and their perceived socioeconomic issues. One of those issues is perceived land ownership. This text states, they ranked increasing frequency of bushfires as a very minor problem, but acknowledged progressively increasing impacts of illegal logging, encroachment, and hunting in areas where logging infrastructure facilitated illegal access. The term encroachment denotes farmers taking advantage of logging roads to move into concession areas in violation of the law and of concessionaires' plans. We differentiated this from the exercise of the rights of local populations that felt the concessionaire had taken over their traditional lands. This excerpt shows the social issues of perceived land ownership. Settler colonialism could be argued as a starting point for issues over land ownership such as described. The native populations never had the chance to rightfully own and use the land as they saw fit. Today, this social injustice continues more along the lines of a certain type of economic Darwinism, in that these transnational corporations are the winners and the present population are the losers when it comes to perceived land ownership rights. They continue to be oppressed and blocked off from lands they feel are traditionally theirs prior to the events of colonialism due to their lack of monetary and authoritative power. Ocean acidification is a direct result of increased carbon emissions in the Earth's atmosphere. It is estimated that 30% of produced CO2 emissions have been absorbed into the oceans. As carbon absorbs into ocean waters, the pH of the waters falls, becoming more acidic, causing ecosystems and their carrying capacity of biological life to suffer. This fall in carrying capacity could lead to catastrophic socio-economic issues. Many marine species will suffer from ocean acidification's falling pH levels. Carrying capacity of the oceans will be reduced. One such example is walleye pollock, which suffered from hearing organ degradation in juvenile fish. Another example can be seen in king crab, where survival, growth, and calcium content ratings all fall with lower pH values. These are just two examples of many in the local food chain that will be disturbed.
Biodiversity is a variety of life in a particular ecosystem. Biodiversity is important because it helps keep an ecosystem healthy and provide the things we need to survive, such as food and water. Biodiversity in an ecosystem has been slowly decreasing due to many factors with the land and direct impacts from humans. Risk society can be considered when referring to a loss of biodiversity. Pollution that comes from new technologies may create an unhealthy environment that certain organisms cannot thrive in. Things such as carrying capacity, the amount of organisms that an ecosystem can support, may also be considered when looking at biodiversity. Many other factors affect biodiversity. The main reason for an increase in the loss of biodiversity has to do with land change over the years. Industrialization is increasing, causing more land to be needed. Land change in order to increase agriculture is a main concern for biodiversity. According to Princeton University, agriculture already occurs over approximately 40% of the world's ice-free land, and most projections predict that agriculture will expand and intensify in order to meet rising demands for a larger, wealthier global population. Where and how this expansion takes place will have serious implications for the future of biodiversity. This land change harms and kills off certain organisms in these ecosystems, therefore causing a decrease in biodiversity there. This increase of industrialization can be studied when referring to the treadmill of production theory. The treadmill of production theory states that the desire for economic growth can be spiraling and never stop, even once it begins to harm the environment. Individuals destroying certain ecosystems in order to reach their economic goals leads to this harmful event of losing biodiversity. Other factors such as climate change, overhunting, and pollution can also decrease biodiversity. Bioprospecting can be demonstrated when overhunting is present in an ecosystem. These animals may benefit society when hunted, such as providing a food source, but could also increase the chance of this harmful loss of biodiversity. A loss of biodiversity may cause many problems for a given population. According to We Conserve PA, food production relies on biodiversity for a variety of food plants, pollution, pest control, nutrient provision, genetic diversity, and disease prevention and control. Both medicinal plants and manufactured pharmaceuticals rely on biodiversity. Decreased biodiversity can lead to increased transmission of diseases to humans and increased healthcare costs. Economically, a loss of biodiversity will not produce the renewable economic resources that we need. Some of these renewable resources include biomass of plants, wood for logging, and biofuels. A loss of biodiversity will dramatically negatively impact us as humans. There are many health issues that also come from a loss of biodiversity. The main health issue with a loss of biodiversity is that an increase in infectious disease can occur. Certain pathogens no longer have a host to live on, therefore they are more likely to try to host on humans and livestock. Those pathogens become harmful to anyone living in that ecosystem, and an increase of infectious disease occurs in humans. Deforestation is the act of clearing out trees from a certain area. There are many reasons why deforestation occurs. Most of it is caused by humans. Although clearing away trees provides many benefits to a population, it also causes a lot of negative effects on an ecosystem. One of the main reasons for deforestation is due to agriculture. According to Grace Hewson, an animal advocate, one of the biggest drivers of deforestation is agriculture. Farmland expansion is responsible for 90% of deforestation around the world, including crops grown for both human and animal consumption, as well as the clearing of forests for animal grazing. Another reason for deforestation is due to urbanization. With our human population always increasing, more transportation areas such as roads and railroads also must increase. Many trees in our ecosystem are cut down in order to provide room for roads and railroads. Another reason that it occurs has to do with the increase of logging. The world systems theory can be considered when talking about deforestation. Many countries may benefit from the resource that comes from logging, therefore an increase of deforestation may occur in order to help those other countries. Lastly, things such as agricultural expansion may increase deforestation. Many trees may be cut down in an area in order to make a prosperous environment for food production. Deforestation may cause many problems for a given population. Economically, it may affect the incomes of many individuals. Since so many people rely on logging in order to receive their income, deforestation takes away many jobs. There are many other effects on humans, not just thinking from an economical stance, that result from deforestation. An increase of flooding may result, causing damages to many houses. It also may negatively affect the production of crops, therefore food shortages are more likely to occur. Deforestation negatively affects the land of indigenous people. The negative effect is evaluated using the ecofeminism theory. An example of ecofeminism relating to deforestation was shown in India. According to Asma Akuri, one example is the Chipko Andolan movement in India, a forest conservation movement that was led by indigenous women who were affected by the most rapid deforestation in the 1970s. The goal of this movement was to slow down this rapid deforestation and to increase social and ecological awareness regarding tree conservation. Other impacts that deforestation has on the environment include animals losing their habitats, climate change, and soil erosion.
Usually when we hear about pollution in our society, people tend to think about global warming, climate change. Environmental elements known as biological pollutants originate from living things and have the potential to harm us. They include things like animal hair, saliva, and pollen from plants and trees, some bacteria and viruses. Asthma is a frequent issue caused by biological pollutants. When we breathe in the air, many biological contaminants that are airborne make their way into our bodies. Chemical pollution is one of the reasons for biological pollution. For example, cars drive around us, the person breathes in the air full of CO2, which is a chemical, and get into our body and attack our health. We found that 91.55% of households report they having access to at least one vehicle in 2020, up from 90% in 2015. Desertification is a change in soil properties, vegetation, or climate, which result in persistent loss of ecosystem services that are fundamental to sustaining life. Desertification affects large dryland area worldwide and is a significant cause of stress in human societies. Climate change in human activities such as overgrazing, removal of natural vegetation, and agricultural activity can be regarded as the two main causes of desertification. Also, it is important to mention that these human activities are triggered by population growth, the impact of the market economy, and poverty. One of the main reasons which causes desertification is overgrazing. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt observed during the Dust Bowl that a nation that destroys itself. The farmers who care for the livestock typically come from socio-economically disadvantaged background. As a result, they must turn the livestock onto pasture and leave them to fend for themselves because they are unable to provide them They're unable to provide them with the necessary amount of feed. Overgrazing, as previously mentioned, is a major cause of desertification because it turns fertile or grazing land into unproductive wasteland. Due to the loss of vital nutriment, the resulting soil is unsuitable for growing food. Food availability is directly impacted by the decline in land productivity. This intensifies the decline in food supply, and if population growth is still present, it leads to famine and economical difficulties. 70% of African continent is subject of desertification. Nearly 40% of Africans rely on marginal dry land for subsistence. Society needs trees to absorb CO2. Yet many construction businesses clear natural vegetation by cutting down forests and ruin the soil's ecology in order to build home for people. Because consumers are consistently buying new cars and the auto industry is consistently introducing new model, there are fewer and fewer trees in the world as a result of deforestation, which is a commodity chain cycle that contributes to desertification.